3-item agenda. Are there any changes?
I move to approve the agenda as published.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, we have an agenda. First on the agenda is the amendment to Lacey Municipal Code 9.12.060 harassment. And Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Matt Sharp, Assistant City Attorney. This is maybe a small item and really kind of housekeeping in its nature. It would be an update to our harassment statute. There has been some case law that has changed the state of the law and thus necessitates an update to the Lacey Municipal Code. Our municipal code allows prosecution for actions under harassment with various definitions. For our purposes today, we're focusing on the 4th prong, and I'll just read it briefly. That's to maliciously do any act which is intended to harm substantially the person threatened or another with respect to his or her physical or mental health, safety, financial condition, or personal relationships. And the person by words or conduct places the person threatened in reasonable fear the threat will be carried out. And so we are primarily concerned with the mental health, financial condition, and personal relationship aspects of this statute. In 2001, a little while ago, the state Supreme Court examined the state statute, which also included that mental health angle. The state statute did not include what we have for financial condition and personal relationships, but we did have that mental health aspect. And the state Supreme Court found that that language in the state statute was unconstitutional for 2 reasons, because it was vague and because it was overbroad. And I'd be happy to run down that rabbit hole, but I'll just skip it until I'm asked. Examining that case, and it's kind of interesting that was over 20 years ago, and just now we're looking at this. It was a fairly dormant section of the code, hasn't really come up as an issue. It looks like that was similar for the state as well, because just this year, the state legislature passed their update to their statutes. So they're going to remove that mental health language from the state statute effective in July.
So the courts ruled this in 2001, you said?
Yes,
And
Yep.
the states just now are moving it?
that's right.
Okay.
The court did treat the statute a bit in its ruling, saying, there's severability here. So really only that portion of it was unconstitutional. And it was allowed to stay on the books, just the state couldn't prosecute under it. And again, we had mirroring language, but it was dormant. So examining the court's analysis for vagueness and overbreadth as it pertains to the mental health condition, it appears that the financial condition and personal relationships in our code would also be vulnerable to the same analysis. And as such, this office is recommending that we update the municipal code, this committee forward to council ordinance that would remove that language and bring the code up to date. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, anyone? So we do need a motion on this then to forward it to council. I'm assuming, right?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We will forward this to the full council.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the behavioral nuisance ordinance. Dave.
Correct. Good morning, council members. I am here to discuss some potential changes to the Lacey Municipal Code as it pertains to nuisances. So nuisances are defined specifically throughout the Lacey Municipal Code in various areas. And we have them in the criminal code, we have them in land use, we have them as they pertain to animals. There's several sections. And nuisances, typically, there's a few instances where they're automatically categorized as a misdemeanor and can be prosecuted. But for the most part, there are civil violations that are handled in a civil route through the hearings examiner. And, if the city department, if a particular department feels that a nuisance is occurring, and we've recently had one where it's property maintenance violations, where a person is allowing a lot of refuse and junk vehicles and et cetera to be be collected on their home. Then the department will fill out a report and there will be a notice of violation and perhaps a voluntary corrective order with the property owner. If there's no agreement, then that would go to the hearings examiner. The hearings examiner would review the matter and then determine whether there's a violation, and that violation then could be appealed to Superior Court. So we have that process set in the code already. What I'm discussing today with the behavioral nuisance ordinance would be more specific to different types of conduct that would be occurring on a property that the city would like to also categorize as a nuisance, and also have these sorts of activities be eligible for a civil violation. So I sent a brief email this morning, and I know the mayor has it. What I have, and I'll hand you now, is just a brief, and you can just follow with me. Well, no, got more backups. Okay, Rick's got it. What this is, there's certain buildings, and this has been happening for a while in the city. There's certain buildings and land that can have an elevated number of crimes associated with the property, and where the use of this property can have a negative impact on the community. There can be public safety issues, health issues, general welfare of the community. And where real properties used for illegal behaviors in specific circumstances, it's this type of repeated chronic behavior that the city that we're recommending be defined as a nuisance, and thus the Lacey Police Department would be the lead actor in of course providing the information, and then that nuisance could be communicated to the property owner, and then hopefully agreement would be reached on how to remedy this. If not, then of course then the hearings examiner route would be useful. So what I've handed you now just defines what a chronic behavioral public nuisance is, and it's basically a property that has repeated violations on it over a certain number of times. It could be, we're proposing perhaps 3 or more activities within 90 days or 5 or more within a 2-year period. And you can see under what would be perhaps, section 020, we don't know exactly where this is going to go in the code, and I'll get to that in a minute. But there's a lot of different crimes that would be, if there's a reasonable belief that these have been occurring, and the proof would be a preponderance of the evidence standard, which is a civil standard, which is more likely than not. So the hearings examiner would be taking evidence that more likely than not, there's been these repeated criminal activities that, and there are A through S in here, all these various criminal activities. And it's important that it's a preponderance of the evidence standard, because the city wouldn't be waiting for a conviction of some crime, or, so the police reports would be able to be used to support this. And the reason I don't have a full ordinance in front of you, I talked to Rick at council meeting last Thursday, and the staff report was getting so into the weeds because this touches a lot of other areas of the code. Hearings examiner, for example, which is an area that the Community and Economic Development Department is going to be approaching this committee, I think in June, with some proposed edits, or maybe that would go to actually land use, but and so that's going to have some ties into this. So what I'm looking for from the council today, well, it's basically just information. I'm just providing this committee with the information that this is a direction that staff is taking, and we're going to present the council with a proposed ordinance that would deal with behavioral public nuisances on real property. But it's also going to have some amendments to the hearing examiner provisions as well, just because by their very nature, they're intertwined. So anyways, I don't know council has any, or if the committee has any specific questions about this.
I can add on one thing real
Yeah.
quick too on kind of our current practices, because this is something we don't have on the books. But currently, if we do have a property that has a lot of activity going on, that maybe not the result of the actual property, but this activity being allowed to occur and it becomes a public safety issue, we generally try to approach them, and especially our police department, and talk to them about either CPTED, community crime prevention through environmental design, how they can best put up security cameras, those type of things. But, and a lot of times those property owners are very responsive, but in some cases, if they don't respond, we need to have something to be able to notify them that this is a serious issue, that's a continued nuisance to the community, and that they need to come to the table and work with us on how to address it. So I just want to kind of put that out there, is that we do have these issues pop up, but this is something to help us bring a non-responsive party to the table.
I don't know if this is talking out of turn. Are there some specific areas of concern that has prompted this?
There historically have been properties, and this would go back, several years, perhaps even decades, where, like Rick indicated, there's always the option for communication and discussion and, looking for remedies. And there are some areas, and some go away in time, and then there will be a new one that shows up. So I wouldn't want to indicate that there's any specific property that we're necessarily focused on. This is just more of a tool that I think is going to be very helpful going forward as the city gets larger, as future properties that we may even be unaware of, could have an issue like this, and we'd like to be have an additional tool that we can use to remedy that.
Okay.
Mayor, any questions or?
No, so when do you think we will see a full ordinance?
The ordinance is done for, what I've handed you is what I want added, or what I would recommend be added into the code. But there's some elements of it that tie into hearings examiner that the council is also going to have to address. And those areas are not completed, which is why I didn't want to piecemeal, an ordinance to you. But I also didn't want to kick this can down the road any further. And I just wanted the committee to just be aware of the direction that the staff is looking into on this, and that I certainly hope to bring to full council a proposal in late June. That's my personal goal.
So the other big question here is the public often reaches out to council and says, there are people who are maybe without a home that are along the right of way, or in other places that are harassing. And it's always difficult to try to figure out what is considered harassment or not. This almost goes back to the last agenda item that we talked about. Does this ordinance have any effect on that as well? Could there be a situation where an individual is along a right of way and is chronically harassing the public?
It could, Mayor. That's a good question. I think what's important here is that there's got to be accountability on the part of the owner. The activity has to be, and what we're considering is reasonably preventable. So if the owner of the property is allowing conduct and allowing the community members at large to be quote unquote harassed and doing nothing about it, but could be doing something to prevent it, then yes, then I think that's where this ordinance could step in. But oftentimes an owner has little or no control, and with certain existing circumstances, that is in fact the case. And so we would certainly need to be very careful as to how how this ordinance would be utilized. And it certainly needs to give every property owner or person in charge of the property every opportunity to, and this is where it comes to the communication that Rick was talking about. Give them every opportunity to clarify their position, clarify what they have tried to do or what they are unable to do. And certainly with the existing state of affairs, there is a lot of there's a lot of things that can't be done. So but this ordinance could perhaps be used in a situation like that, definitely.
I mean, in that circumstance, if they're in the city right away, we are the property owner. Right?
Right. Yeah,
If they're in the city of Lacey, yes.
Yeah. So we could be in violation of our own.
Well, I think I would posit that the city of Lacey does a lot to
remember the situation.
try to remedy situations like that. And the city does take all steps to prevent such behavior to the extent that it can.
You can see how we're walking a fine line there.
Absolutely.
So for my own clarity here, the idea here is to be able to hold the property owner, whoever is responsible for the property, responsible for these types of acts happening on their property by someone else.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
That's right.
Because all of these things, I mean, these are all things that we'd be arresting someone for and
Absolutely.
prosecuting. So
Absolutely.
that would be happening on its own. And now we're talking about it happening multiple times on the same property. So now we're holding the property owner responsible for not allowing the activity on their
Such
property.
that the property owner's actions are creating a nuisance in the community that's
Okay.
affecting.
or
other-
lack of
So-
action.
So
Totally
that's
get it.
right.
No, I'm on board.
And a parallel to that is a unsafe structure. In the building codes, we have, if they have a dilapidated structure that poses a risk, they don't take measures to board it up or tear it down to make it so it's not a nuisance, then you have the ability to go, right.
So the
Same thing as
intent
activity.
behind the revision is to encourage property owners to be part of the solution.
Correct.
Whether that be to install security cameras or have good, healthy communication with law enforcement about activities that are going on their property, making sure that the city is well aware of illegal behavior that is consistent. But if we have an owner that is indifferent about anything going on their property, then that could pose a problem.
That's right. And as Rick indicated, the city would bring forward to the table a lot of possible solutions
Okay.
and a lot of tools to assist the property owner.
Okay. This
We're
isn't
not-
here to punish business owners,
We're not
but
trying to point
to
the finger
try
at
to-
anybody.
to create a sense of security within the city limits. Yeah, okay.
That's right.
Anything further, anyone? So you don't need any actions, it's just a
No,
briefing.
nothing. This is going to come
look forward
forward in a more complete form to the full council. I just wanted to give this committee just a heads up of what we're doing.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Good.
All right, we will move on then to the third item on our agenda, council policies, procedures, manual updates.
Are you gonna be around?
Perry and Melissa,
Yeah, after
come
this meeting.
on up.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to talk to you for a second.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Hi, Mayor.
Hey.
I'm here with our Deputy City Clerk, Alyssa Fontaine, and we are here to provide an update and recommended changes to Chapter 7 and 9 of your Council Policies and Procedures Manual. Since the last review and approval of the revisions of the policy manual, it was March 2nd, 2023, staff identified these proposed amendments for your review. And I'll identify the major one. There are some housekeeping amendments sprinkled through as well. But in Chapter 7, 7.01, under meetings, the council approved ordinance 1610, December 16th, 2021, to change the start of your council and work session meetings from 7 p.m. to 6 p.m. And we are just updating the policy to align with that change. And on page 2, at the very top, we Under legislative meetings, we've added the 35th district to your legislative meetings. So it's now 2nd, 22nd, and 35th district. There's also a couple housekeeping items under editorial board and the guidelines for the editorial board meeting. And then under sections 7.03
We
and
still do those once or twice a year?
We haven't
We used
since
to go to one, but I don't remember having it
pre-pandemic,
recently.
and I will be reaching out to the editor for Olympia to see if we can resurrect that and see what they think about that. But yeah, that's one thing that I noticed in our policies as well is
I don't remember doing that for quite some time. Okay.
It's
Been a
never
while
happened
since-
since I've been on council.
No.
and then on page 3 of 9 and 4 of 9, these changes are grammatical edits and for ease of reading. 7.05 executive session. We are amending the language here in the policy to align with the OPMA. Just to be more specific and clear, there's no changes to the OPMA. We're just updating the policy to align with that OPMA language. And then under 7.06, more housekeeping, just one small item at the very bottom of the page. And section 7.07, this is the majority of the changes are in this. It's the order of business. And what staff realized and found was the agenda order of business in your council meeting did not align with the policy. We've been using, it's not a huge change, it's just the resolutions we have first and then ordinances.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
So in the call to order, in the very last, it says, what's been lined out is following the call to order, those in attendance are asked to join the council in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
yes. So that was a sentence that is actually just moved down 2 paragraphs. So it is the same sentence.
Oh,
It's
gotcha.
just moved.
I just needed to read a little further.
Yeah, so
Just
we
kinda
did,
caught my
it's
eye,
not
what?
removing the pledge.
We're not doing the pledge anymore?
No, we are. And so that order of business, we're just aligning the council policy to be what we've been using for at least 10 years for the agenda in the council meeting.
So it says here that the mayor takes roll call. I haven't, can't remember last time we've actually done a roll call. But if it's in our policies and procedures, are you saying that I should be doing a roll call?
Yes, it's recommended to do that. It's also within that roll call would be to identify those that are excused and those that are in, remote attendance.
You do that though.
Yeah,
I mean,
you do
always
that.
announce who's remote and who's
And that's-
not in attendance.
But I don't say, Councilor Greenstein, you say present,
Right. Yeah.
or, position 1, position 2, position 3. I noticed that they did that at the North Thurston Public School Board meeting the other day,
Oh,
they-
yeah.
but is that something that you recommend me doing in this circumstance? Is
I
having,
think, I'm gonna defer that to probably Rick and Shannon and ask you if you would want them to specifically. Sometimes in some agencies, the clerk actually calls out,
Yeah.
and takes that roll call, but it's actually a function for the mayor in our city.
It's a formality and it's something that hasn't, my knowledge, done traditionally. The role is taken account for in the minutes that the clerk, Perry provides and Elizabeth provides for the meeting. So as long as announcing the who is absent and excused absences or who's on virtual, that's like the biggest challenge is making sure that we capture if somebody's present or not present through virtual mechanisms.
Correct. I think that's the importance. The important part of that roll call would be the announcing who is excused and who is virtual. The audience, the public that they can't see those that are virtual. So if you only have 3 council members sitting at the dais, they might not know that you actually do have a quorum.
Shannon had something.
I
to
was
say.
gonna echo what Perry just said about it being sometimes difficult to see who is actually present, depending on where you watch the video or how you're watching the video. The other thing to be aware of, and I know Perry's gonna get into this here in just a second when we discuss the second part of this, is that when we move to our new legislative system called Civic Clerk, we will also be able to identify who is present and who is absent visually, which will help anybody who might be watching the video. But again, if you're listening to the audio, it could be difficult to determine who might be present at a council meeting.
Okay. Well, I guess I could, let me think on that. What's the best way to do that? I could say who's present and who's absent. I just haven't typically said who's present, but that might make sense.
Well, if you say who's absent, that kind of tells you who's present, doesn't it, too?
Yeah. Let me think on that.
Okay. That sounds good. And then the bottom of, so this continues, the order of business for your council meeting agenda continues until page 8. And then at the bottom of page 8, we're actually adding the order of business for your work sessions. And that is just to be consistent, and it may look a little bit different here in the order of business in the policy, but this will align with when we do have the new agenda management system. We will actually have call to order, and we probably will be eliminating the time where it says 6 p.m. to 6:30. We're going to track that on our end, on the back end. But we won't be having the time allotted. And then the approval of the agenda, which currently we don't actually show on our work session agenda. And then we'll list the agenda items, and then the adjourn, which we have adjourned right now on the agenda. And then moving to 7.08 is just another housekeeping to, we had not put the website address down, and this is the new URL, the new address for the website that we're listing. And then moving to chapter 9, it's starting with page 1 of 3, it's 9.12 for voting procedures. This is going to allow the new agenda management system is going to allow electronic voting. And so we are adding language in here to show that you're allowed to do that, to do electronic voting if it is something you guys want to do and move
So would
forward.
that be for if you were remote or whatever you mean, you'd be able to vote electronically? Is that what you're?
That's also in person.
Mhm.
And then from what I understand, we're gonna have more procedures and training on this when the system becomes available. And we have it implemented, that we will have a screen showing the votes that are there. And then the clerk will be able to enter those votes, and it'll be a display.
So this will be available, but we don't necessarily, that would be something that would require council action to actually start using that, I'm assuming, because I don't see any real use in that at the moment, but.
Right, I don't know if it's a council action, or it's more of just, it'll be available with the new system.
Okay.
So when the training starts, that can be a discussion.
We're onboarding a new system platform for the legislative process, and part of that's going to have this voting tool option that will be an option for council members to use.
Okay.
So we'll be briefing the council more as the system gets further along on the onboarding process and provide training.
And it might be something that if you don't want to use, you want to use, your old system, but then the clerk can record those votes and it'll be visible in the chambers. And then, so that concludes the amendments that we are providing. And I know that the mayor has mentioned that he does want to think about the roll call, but we are asking for a motion to move this forward to the full city council for approval.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion?
Yeah, I have a couple things. The first is, I think it's time for this council to have a conversation on when we actually meet as a council. we've been meeting on Thursdays, for long since before I was on council, and I've tried to find out why we meet on Thursdays and not say Wednesdays or another day. And there's, I'm not sure how we came up with this day. I do know that the community tends to have a lot of events on Thursday evenings, and which means that are precluded from those events. For example, the VCB is having their annual meeting on, I think, June 1st on Thursday at 7 o'clock. We're going to miss it. We can't go to it. That happens quite often. I would kind of like to have a discussion with a full council on maybe moving our time to a different day, a Wednesday, and I think in particular seems to make the most sense. But I'm just curious where you
That's
guys
worth
are.
the conversation for sure. I tell you that I might lean toward, just as an idea, Tuesday, only because
Yep.
I believe both of the other cities, or the two other largest cities, meet on Tuesday.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
nothing's ever scheduled on Tuesday nights because they know that both of those councils are meeting. So it might make sense to meet the same night, just as an idea.
It very well could. I mean,
Worth the
I'm not
discussion.
opposed to Tuesday either. I'm just sort of opposed to continue to go on Thursday. It just doesn't make any sense.
So you don't like doing it just because we've always done it that way?
No, I don't.
One of the things I just want to throw out there, and it's really good to have these type of conversations and see if there is a better way for, better night for councils to meet. We'll also, as part of that conversation, we need to have some prep time when you want to have it, because we want to put together what are the schedules for all the other boards and commissions of the city of Lacey, and then other community
Sure.
boards, because you got the interjurisdictional boards as well. I think Lot meets on Wednesdays, for example, and so then
That's one of the reasons I said Tuesday, because none of the
Yep.
interjurisdoctionals meet because the other two
that
councils
makes-
both meet that
that
night.
makes perfectly sense.
I have met quite a few times for JazzCon on a Tuesday. But yeah, so there's gonna be some shifting involved and
Yeah, so we want to make sure where all those meetings are kind of lying on the
So
universe, and kind of have that so you can kind of look up. what's
can you
happening.
put together that sheet,
Yep.
all of it, and then maybe schedule a work session, and as we go to pass this, obviously we'll pass this as is. But Lenny, as you're reporting out, maybe you can talk about, there's discussion about meeting time, and that we're gonna that's gonna come before the council at a future work session to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll prepare that calendar, and we get it scheduled for a future work session.
We've talked about this for a long time, but we haven't done anything about it. So I'm really happy that we're actually gonna not only talk about it, but actually discuss it with full council and hopefully change. I think Tuesday makes a lot of sense. We will have to move a couple of things around if we go to Tuesday, because I think that's when our planning commission meets. But that's
2 nights, yeah, the first and third.
yeah. But we can figure that out. I just don't think Thursdays makes any sense for the city of Lacey to meet on that day. That
We can
evening.
definitely have a conversation about.
And the other thing is it looks like under proclamations that we're putting it into the officially that the mayor and the rest of the council will do proclamations. I've done that as a practice ever since I've been the mayor, but that hasn't been our official policy. So is that going to be our official policy going forward? Under proclamation. I don't have a problem with it, since I've done that by practice for a long time, but it's never been in our official.
It originally was read that the mayor or a council member reads the proclamation. It's being revised to the mayor and council members, I think, to recognize the current
Yeah.
practice.
Is that what your question is?
Yeah,
About the meaning of it?
Yeah, that's totally fine. I'm just saying we're putting it into our policies, what we've been doing in practice for a long time, but that hasn't been that hasn't been an official policy. It's just something that I have done as mayor for a while, and I have no problem with it. I think everyone enjoys being a part of proclamation. I just remember back in the, before we did it that way, it was always kind of weird, like who's doing proclamation, who's going to say something. And I think this works out better when you have the whole council involved.
I do
The
have,
public likes it too.
what page is that on?
For
Page
proclamation
six
6 of
of
9. Yeah.
Actually, I think the public likes it too. I have gotten comments on that, so
I
I
may
think,
have a
I think that
question.
the way you've been doing that in practice, I like it anyway, personally.
Hey, which, okay, order of business, chapter 7,
Yeah, it'd be
Which
6 of
page?
9, 6 of 9.
6 of 9. Public hearings. Proclamations, there we go. Wants to request, may be issued proclamations. Could we modify that to say the mayor and council members may read the proclamation to the record? May
So
read.
I know what you're thinking here, Ed. But just because it says plural council members doesn't mean a council member
Okay,
doesn't have to opt out, right?
okay.
Oh,
Right.
As
Yeah,
council-
there are some times when I choose to opt out. Personally.
Right? It doesn't say every council member has to. It says
Must
council.
or shall. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, all right, that was my only concern. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? Anything further from either of you? All right, now you do need action on this, correct? I mean,
Yes.
actually,
There's
we
a
already had-
motion and a second.
Oh, yeah,
We
okay.
had discussion.
Yeah. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries and we will send this to the full council.
Thank you. Thank you.
That
Thank you,
brings us to the end of our agenda and I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Garth. Thank you, Leslie. Good job.